Okay, this is January the 30th, and what I'm here to talk about is the journey that into or experiencing grief after the loss of a spouse. My name is Ray, and my wife's name was Barbara. And recently, my wife passed away. She had fell on July 4th of 2025, and she passed away in September of 2025. Out of the last 2 months of her life, she got to spend about a week at home at somewhere near the 3 weeks after having had that fall. Her journey in the hospital was very tough. She had suffered a break in her pelvis on one side and a crack in her pelvis on the other side, made it almost impossible to walk. And in fact, she was unable to put any pressure whatsoever on the right side where the break was. And after the third week, I was able to get her out of the hospital, and I took her to a specialist. They found that break that was causing such a problem. And by then, the nerve center had shut down on the right leg, so um, it was not controllable. In other words, she couldn't move it. And then after some work that they did and direct injections near the break, she actually started feeling better when things looked up for her. Up to that point, she'd been in constant pain. And bringing her home was a good thing because it gave her some relief. She actually got to eat some better food. Not a lot, but a little bit. Before I brought her home, she'd had some bouts of bleeding. We didn't know exactly what was going on at the time. She apparently had a type of ulcer just below the bottom of her stomach. We took her, had to take her in the hospital. Her oxygen went down. She started bleeding, and the doctor said, get her in the emergency room immediately. And I did that. I took her to a different hospital. It was closer. And they brought her in and uh, set up some surgery immediately. And they stopped temporarily. They used chemicals to make the blood coagulate at that point. Up to then, she'd spent most of the time on anticoagulants because she had a blood clot in her lung. Now, they couldn't give her something to coagulate because she had blood clots. And it was in a critical spot. Her heart was working overtime, and it was weakened her heart, and the bleeding was getting to the point where it was weakening her titer system. By the time I got her to the hospital, it had picked up, and when they got it stopped, she immediately started turning around. But the coagulants weren't working. The lack of coagulants made it worse. Let's put it that way. She still had that clot in her lung, and that's a long process to try to eliminate it. In any case, she started bleeding very heavily. And that time they went in there and they put a coil in the vein that was bleeding. It was actually pumping at that time. It had brought her down to a level of what they call 4, which is dangerous. Your organs start shutting down, and permanent damage is already taking place when you get down there to that point. And then he brought her back around and she was feeling great. But the next time she started bleeding, they were having a hard time getting it stopped. They'd run out of blood. Her veins collapsed while they were bringing blood from another hospital that was 30 miles away. The decision was made that they were going to bring a team in, and they would come in by helicopter, pick her up, and take her to the larger town that had a larger inventory, and that they would have blood on there as well. They realized that she was so low that the blood that was coming from this other town was not going to be enough to keep her alive. She was at the point of near death when, prior to the hospital, the helicopter getting there. And if you can picture this, there was about 5 people tending to her around that bed, 2 on each side and 1 on the bed. To get liquids in, they had to break the bone in her leg, on her right leg, to get into the bone marrow. It was painful. They couldn't give her anything for it. She was too far gone to accept anything for pain killing. Could not do it, not without killing her. It was tough on her. The helicopter came in and they grabbed her and took her to the next town. And my daughter and I got in the car and went as well. It took us longer to get there, but by the time we got there, the team had temporarily got her stopped, and where she was hooked up to equipment. She was feeling much better, and she had somebody to watch her around the clock. And there was actually somebody in there every 10 or 15 minutes to check her vitals. Uh, and she was mechanically being checked all the time with somebody 100% of the time on the monitors out. And they could look in and see her from the desk that they were sitting at outside her room. And things were going better. And they had facilities where we could spend the nights there as well. We couldn't stay in the room with her the whole time, but they let us stay beyond the normal hours. Now, my wife was 79 years old at the time, and she was wearing out. She was close to death several times. And each time she come back, she was smiling and happy. And the surgeon we took her to while she was home, they had given her shots in the critical areas. The shots had did their job. She was no longer hurting in her pelvis area. And she was getting feeling back in her right leg. She could move it. She still was having trouble controlling her foot. Sometimes the damage done during those periods is permanent. You don't always get everything back. She was gaining a lot through the liquids that were going in, but not able to eat. So they hooked her up to nutrients. It's a bag, looks kind of brown. So I don't know what all was in there, but it's apparently got protein in it to try to keep her muscles from deteriorating. And I don't know what all the supplements were that were in there. But at least she was able to function and doing pretty good. And after a few days, they tried to move her back into regular care. That lasted maybe 3 or 4 days. And then she was back into critical care unit again. She started bleeding heavily. I didn't know how bad it was, but before the last one, she had bled pretty much out 7 times. And she was up and down during the entire time as far as they even put her to sleep for a day and a half to let her body try to recover. They were breathing, the machine was breathing for her. She had chemicals that kept her heart running at the right rate, and that was being adjusted on a regular basis as she was recovering. there was an operation that was needed where they would have to open her up, but she had to be healthy for that to happen. And one of the tests is a nuclear test where they put put it in and they can tell minutely wherever there's a bleed because they didn't know exactly how many places she was bleeding from. They knew the most critical one, but they thought there must be more in that because she was losing blood and they couldn't see it while they were monitoring her. They would actually scoped her and they thought that she wasn't bleeding there, but in fact, she was bleeding. 24 hours before she passed away, the surgeons to them had met with her at 4 o'clock in the morning. I came in early that day because I wanted to meet with them during their rounds. I had no idea that they were going to come in there early, and they had a reason for it. I believe they were discussing what was coming up with my wife, and they had said that they were not going to operate on her. And the people that work on the GI track that were trying to cover it from the inside at that time also said they had done all they could, and that nature apparently was going to have to take its course. She's going to have to. Hopefully, her body would heal, but they could. There was no more that they could do, and she was too weak for the surgeon to open her up. When we came in that morning, my wife had said, "I want to go home right now." At that moment, I didn't know what had took place as far as conversations, and I said, "Well, you know, what's the matter?" She said, "Well, they're not going to operate on me." And I said, "Okay, well, let me talk to them." She said, "I want to go home." I didn't realize the extent of the talk she'd had. And then I, I was upset enough. I got on the staff. I told them I wanted to talk to the surgeons as soon as possible, and they were in surgery at the time. And they said they'd relay the message and get back to me. And this palliative nurse come in. I had no idea at the time why. But she was unaware of a meeting they'd had that morning early of the people that were working on my wife. And so they were all aware that there was not going to be a surgery no matter what, that my wife couldn't take the surgery and that she was pretty much on her own as far as uh, whether she's going to make it or not, in between her and the Lord, apparently. Since I hadn't had that conversation, I was still pushing to say I wanted the operation to happen. And I didn't quit on them until they said, okay. I said, okay, when can we do it? I said, well, the palliative nurse had gotten with the staff and with the administrators. And I was to meet with the administrators and the surgeons the next day, next morning. I said, okay, I'll be in here first thing in the morning and we'll go over it. Well, that night, I got a call. And they had the staff in there, or the nurse that was watching, said that my wife had asked her to call and tell her that she was feeling fine and that they had let her have some jello, which she hadn't had in over a week because she had had A solids in several weeks. And she'd also had some juice and that she was very happy. That was at 9 o'clock at night. We were able to get a little bit of sleep, but at 3 o'clock, the call came. And I knew that couldn't be good, not at 3 in the morning. Anyway, they informed me my wife was in distress and that it'd probably be a good idea if I came in. They said they had given her a shot to relax her a little bit, and they didn't know what kind of shape she would be in when I got in there. You know, so my daughter and I jumped in the car and rushed in there. And when I came in, it was very immediately evident that I knew that the end was here. And it felt like somebody had hit me with a maul in the center of my chest. I walked into a room. Everything was wide open to a room so that they could visually see her while they were in the outside. There was also a couple of people in there with her, part of the staff. And they put myself on one side, my daughter on the other, of my wife. And I didn't know if she could see us at the time or not. Her eyes were fixed, staring straight out. She said she could see us fine. She was talking to us. Then I looked up the equipment and her heart was a little bit fast. She'd had a heart attack a few days before that. And her heart had been fast all along because of the blockage in her lung from blood clots. Her kidneys had shut down, so she was the liquid they were putting in. There's no place for it to go, and she was ballooned up pretty bad, and she was leaking through the arms right here on both sides, and down towards her ankles and part of her legs. It was just water was coming out, and they had pads down there to soak it up. Those big pads, they're big blue pads. And I told him, I said, well, this is, soaked up. I mean, it's full of water. I said, okay. They changed them out real quick. And of course, they filled up quickly again. And there was the bag they had to collect urine, there was nothing in it. Like I say, her kidneys had shut down. And so she was pretty uncomfortable. She had, obviously, it was around her lungs given pressure, so it was hard for her to breathe. She was on elevated amounts of oxygen at that time. And she knew it was the end. And like I say, she knew it way before I did because of the talk she had with the surgeons. I don't think she wanted to tell us the full extent because she probably wanted us to have some sort of a relaxation before the inevitable was coming. She knew it was going to come shortly. And we talked to her and held her right up until the last few minutes. And she had closed her eyes towards the end, and I held her in my arms. I told her how much I loved her. She let the last 15, 20 minutes, her breathing become labored. When they talk about that death rattle, it was present. She was not going to recover. And in the last moments, they'd asked me if I still wanted to have them give her CPR. I had seen that performed before and knew that my wife was not recovering. Her internal organs had pretty much failed. And for the last 2 months of her life, the only thing that was keeping her alive was the equipment that was hooked to her and the chemicals that were pumped into her and the medications that they were giving her. Nothing on this earth was going to keep her going. And I said, no. I knew that it was over. And a few months later, she was gone. They had asked us to leave the room for a few minutes while they unhooked the equipment. And, they were involved with cleaning her up a little bit. She had been bleeding in her last moments, and a lot of things happen to you. They call us back in. I sat with my wife, I don't know how long. And then we left. And they asked me to make sure I was making arrangements for her body before I left. And I did that. I had given the wrong funeral home. My mind wasn't working correctly. I got home and realized it. And I called the right funeral home, and I explained to them what happened. And they immediately called the hospital so that they could intervene before the body was transferred. And they also called the other funeral home as well. The I didn't I couldn't do anything. I couldn't think about anything, either the moment or anything I was going to do from that moment on. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and hadn't been eating hardly anything for 2 months. By that time I'd lost like 40 some pounds. I still haven't put any weight back on. The grief part of it makes it so you really don't have any taste for anything at that point. You're just floating through maybe instinct or whatever. One of my daughters was trying to help out as much as she could. And over the next week, things, um, the initial reality set in by then, let's put it that way. And I was going to have to fend for myself for one of the first times in my life. I went from childhood with a family, went into the military with a family, really. Married while I was in the military. Somebody had always been there, either in guidance or as company, in my entire life, from the time I was born until the moment my wife was gone. The reality doesn't set in right away. It's just a fog. The other day, I walked out on the back porch or back patio, and I looked out at all the things that my wife had looked at for the last almost 23 years. Beautiful trees. Where we planted bushes, actually, my wife had decided where they went. I left all the designing up to my wife, and we both planned together when and how it'd be done and things like that. And I realized how close and how many things we did together in our lifetime. But the hardest part, that we weren't going to sit out there together to enjoy those things ever again. That she was truly gone from this part of life. That's only been a couple of days ago, and to say the least, it kicked the hell out of me, and still does. Now, the hurt come back. Feelings can't be exactly just, you can't really decide them. And I looked to see how everybody else was handling it this time, their stage. And it's very, one guy hit the nail on the head, described every feeling that goes on in that period. And I looked at 30 or 40, maybe 50 different things that had been handled. And then, like I say, each of them handled it maybe in a different way. I don't, absolutely don't know what's going to happen in the future. I haven't really prepared that much for it. I really, I guess I haven't wanted to look at it. During the time when my wife was in dire straits, I actually prayed, and I would have loved to take the place of my wife because in preparation for our end, I had never prepared to be alone. We always had planned for everything but that. I guess I really didn't want to face that type of situation. It's not the best time in my life for it to happen at this time as well. There is a little bit of stress that goes on under normal lifestyles. And my wife and I were so used to facing everything in life together, the good, the bad, the different goals in life. When somebody's there to help you make the decisions are easier to make, believe it or not, especially after this many years. 62 years, it really truly is a lifetime. I mean, we met when we were 14 and 16. She was a knockout. She knocked me off my feet. She really did. I couldn't hardly look at her walking down the a hallway without my heart almost popping out of my chest. She was she was everything. In real life, in real terms. There was never a time that I felt that I measured up to what my wife was. You know, the early part of a marriage, it's push, 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 getting somewhere, doing something, and people somewhat can grow apart during that period of time. I mean, you come together during times of grief or when things are tough, but you take life for granted and you can become very selfish in life itself. But I can tell you, this last 40 years, we were so close that it almost felt like We were actually one, not two individuals. And it showed up in everything we did, finishing sentences. When I go get groceries, there's quite a few times where I went where my wife couldn't physically be there. We did it as partners. I'd push the basket, my wife would fill it up, and then we'd carry them in together. When one was sick, the other did the help administering medication, checking that everything's going okay, doing the household chores all by herself while the other one healed, or drove each other to our medical appointments. My wife never complained when she had to do something like that. Through two back surgeries of mine, she waited on me 24 hours a day. It wasn't easy. Part of that time I couldn't walk. My legs didn't work very well. The nerves in my spinal cord had cut a lot of the control off for me to walk very well. And when I did try to walk, the pain was so devastating. It was like lightning hitting, and it was bad. There was a point during one of my operations, prior to it, that just a simple act of trying to get up and go to the bathroom, I had to take a pain pill and wait about 10 or 15 minutes before I could get in there. And at that time, I was using a walker and a wheelchair. At this point, I realized the things that kept me from having to be assisted by outside resources were no longer available. And one of the things we discussed was that neither one of us would ever end up in a nursing home. I have no intentions of ever being in a facility like that. I've seen what they are. I understand how they operate, and I understand that very few are staffed to the level that the law says they have to be. I don't know of any out there that haven't been fined by the US government or the state inspectors. The best thing I can hope for is that the Lord calls me home sooner rather than later. You know, there's those out there right now that wish that I would be at the very end. They've expressed it. For those people, let me tell you something. I don't disagree with you. I really don't want to be here. I'm not going to take my life, but I want my Lord to do it for me. I'm not going to take a chance of not making that walk through the pearly gates or whatever you want to call it. I want to meet my wife again. The fact that I don't want to live any longer, that's just the way it is. So if you want to pray for my demise, have at it. It doesn't bother me that people want me to die. It doesn't bother me in the least. I don't like to be called names, obviously. But then if you enjoy it, I guess whatever brings joy into your heart, your life, that's up to you. I'm beyond the point of hate. When you know that your life has been somewhat shortened, you have a little worry or you don't care about things as much as you did. Those things kind of go away and you look forward to this future with your Savior, you become more compassionate, I guess, is part of it. There are things on this earth that I still love: my children, my pets, good friends and neighbors. But the other side has a majority of my friends, my relatives. It's a bigger reason that I want to make that final trip. If I have my full facilities, I'll never allow myself to be hooked up to a bunch of equipment to extend my life no more than, even if it's only for an extra minute. I don't want it. Sometimes I get a kick out of the people or the things that they say or do that have no realization of what life really is about. You have to face it, hoping that you've had enough moral fiber to pass the test on Judgment Day. I've already settled, as far as I'm concerned, with the Lord. If I would have had a wish, it would have been to walk that path with my wife in those last moments. And I certainly would jump at the chance to trade places with her. A couple of days ago, when I realized that there was no chances that my wife was going to come back and step on this earth and take off where we left off. Walking out on that porch, you could say it changed my future in some ways. Knowing something rather than wishing, there's a big divide between the two. On something like this, it's so final. You can wish all you want, you can pray all you want. But my wife has already begun the journey of eternal life. I don't know why the Lord has chose to bring her home first, or the fact that I'm still here on this earth. I just know that I'd rather be with my wife. So, for lack of better terms, you haters, you actually don't realize how quickly your wishes probably are going to come. At my age, it is a day-to-day journey. There are no promises for a future for somebody like me, none. And when you don't wish for a future on this earth, then you have none. That's realization. You can't say anything to me or even do something to me that's going to make me feel any worse or better. Well, I've about said everything I'm going to say as I pass through the different phases of meeting the final path towards eternity. I'll try to put something up, something positive maybe. I really don't hate anybody on this earth, but there's some that I don't like very well. In fact, you could say it's closer to detesting. That's it, I think. I don't want anybody to feel sad or worry about me. And uh, if anything, you can say prayers that keep me on the path towards this eternal goal. That would help. I do believe in eternity. I do believe I'll get to see my wife on the other side and the son that passed, and my parents and my grandparents and friends. And I don't expect it to be like it is here on earth. But then I'm close enough to it that I'm not going to have to wonder for very long, hopefully. Time don't mean much when you get into your last part of your life. Doesn't mean much at all. You see, this entire world is going much faster than what I ever intended it or thought I would have to live through. This next part of my life, being eternal, probably is going to be going like a jet plane, that faster than sound. I'm not unhappy about reaching over and going into this next step that's going to be coming. I'm, I am not necessarily what you call upset. I don't know really what I am. The stage that I'm in, this realization of nothing is going to return to what it was. That bothers me. And it's made me cranky the last couple of days. Maybe I shouldn't have ever stepped out on that porch and put it into the perspective of my wife and I standing out there together, enjoying the glory of the things that the Lord give us, of the trees and the leaves and the flowers and the bushes and the pets. Our companions are so loving and forgiving, and they are so much of what we wish to accomplish for ourselves. You can't help but love those pets. Right up until my wife was in her last breaths of life on earth here, she was worried about the pets. She loved them so much. I think I probably should end this. I'm not unhappy. Um, I'm just a little cranky and maybe wishing that as fast as things are rolling, that it would roll a little quicker. And no matter what, I don't think that I'm going to have a wish to really stick around that long. I don't have that wants that I had at one time. I, I don't have those things to look forward to. Um, I've got some things coming up in the next few months that I want to finish if I can. You could call it the last hurrah. My age is going to hold me back from doing too many things in the future, if anything. But I'm in the hands of the Lord from this moment on. Well, that's about it for today. Um, like I say, don't feel sorry for me. I've accepted the terms of life, regardless of whether I'm in it or out of it. It won't matter. The stage is set, and the play's going to go on, and the good Lord is the one that's directing it. All right, well, I guess that's about it for today. I hope you heard me fine and that I haven't done a glitch in here where I screwed up this video. Oh, Lord. With that, I'm going to say goodbye. Not goodbye in life, though. Please don't think that I'm doing that. I'm not. Like I say, the natural course where the Lord asked me to come, that will be the next step. It's not one where I'm going to take it. Maybe one of my haters will come by and finish it for me. They could be the avengers of Satan or whatever it is. There's plenty of them out there. With that, I'm going to let you go. And I want you to have a good day. I need to look up my camera up there. See you later.